Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your space for black news, black views, and you can bet your bottom dollar you're going to get some black opinions. Today is Thursday, March 24th. I'm Seth London.
I'm Mimi Brown.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo, and on today's report, after 3 long days, confirmation hearings for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson have wrapped up. How soon could the Senate vote on her nomination? Meanwhile, Vice President Harris announces a White House plan to end racist home appraisals. Then, COVID poses a severe risk to pregnant women. What a new study reveals.
Plus, a former KKK headquarters that terrorized a town for years gets a new lease on life to help the community. And Drake is giving LeBron James a ton of Bitcoins, while the rapper is donating his roulette winnings to a good cause.
We have that and so much more. This is our voice and our truth. So let's get it.
It has been quite the historic week. Biden's historic choice to replace Justice Stephen Breyer on the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson. She survived a bruising week of questions through long and sometimes frustrating diatribes delivered by GOP senators. But a new Gallup poll says that the majority of Americans, 58% of them, they believe that the Senate should confirm Jackson to the high court.
Joining us now to take a look at the confirmation hearings is Amisha Cross. She's a political commentator and Democratic strategist. She's joining us from D.C. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker is never at a loss for words. He gave a tribute to the judge that brought her to tears, brought me to tears. Here's a little bit of what he had to say.
So you faced insults here that were shocking to me. Well, actually not shocking. But you are here because of that kind of love. And nobody's taken this away from me. So you got 5 more folk to go through. 5 more of us. And then you can sit back and let us have all the debates. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a well-charted Senate floor because it's not going to stop. They're going to accuse you of this and that. Heck, in honor of your person who shares your birthday, you might be called a communist. But don't worry, my sister. Don't worry. God has got you. And how do I know that? Because you're here. And I know what it's taken for you to sit in that seat. Today, you're my star. You are my harbinger of hope.
He went on to say, you know, they're not going to take this joy. They're not going to steal this joy from me. What was your takeaway from this exchange between Booker and Judge Jackson?
It was beautiful. It was proof positive that Black men do stand in when Black women need them. But on top of that, I think that he kind of level set a lot of the craziness that we saw over the past 3 days, with that being attacks that were lobbed against Ketanji Brown Jackson around CRT, around being soft on crime, around child sex crimes and child pornography, a whole bunch of craziness designed basically to rile up the conservative base and to push towards the 2022 midterms and the 2024 presidential election. I think that what we saw from Senator Booker was a level setting of sorts. We saw him, being responsible for and taking up courage for and taking up the mantle for what we actually saw, what I consider one of the strongest people we've seen before this, before a Senate committee as it relates to the Supreme Court justice nomination process. But with that being said, this is a Black woman who knew going into this that she would be attacked relentlessly, even though she was, quite frankly, before many of the same conservative men who have confirmed her 3 times in the past. Hashtag Lindsey Graham. When we watch this, we also watch and note the fact that Cory Booker said what millions of Black people across the globe were saying at the same time. This woman is strong. She's smart. She's the best of us. She is our democracy. She is the strength of what our democracy should look like. Meanwhile, she's someone who's being castigated simply because she walks in a Black body that happens to be female.
Yeah, it's amazing. This is just another example of the saying we have to be twice as good to just get half the recognition. And she has really shown how composed she is, what has made her an incredible judge and her rounded experience. But what do you think the American people are getting from watching this play out in real time? We've seen a bit of political theater. We've seen Republican senators taking an opportunity to make this about issues that she may not even have to ever address on the bench, and even storming out. Is it time to change the way that these hearings are conducted?
It's absolutely time to change the way these hearings are conducted. And to the point of your first question, what do you think the American people take away from this? It depends on which American people you ask. Black America was watching, and they saw what we've seen on display day in and day out. Black people be diminished regardless of their accolades, regardless of their accomplishments and experience, regardless of having to prove themselves consistently, being asked about their test scores. We saw that from some right-wing media, giants. We've also seen on that stage a woman who was literally postured and keeping her composure throughout some of the strongest beratement that I've seen, particularly on a Senate confirmation stage, acknowledging the fact that this is a woman who is going to be confirmed. Period. In a few weeks, Ketanji Brown Jackson will be the first Black female Supreme Court justice this nation has ever seen. With that being said, that did not stop a single Republican senator from haranguing, from attacking, from bringing up things that have nothing to do with not only her position as a potential Scottish justice, but also any Scottish justice that is currently seated. CRT isn't even a federal issue, much less one that's going to come up before the Supreme Court of the United States. It is very much a local issue. And by the way, critical race theory isn't taught in any K-12 setting in America. Right. With that being said, we also heard questions like ranking yourself on a Christian from 1 to 10. Where do they do that? There is no Christianity litmus test to getting on the Supreme Court. There was a lot of offensive things that happened throughout this.
You are so right. Where do they do that? Rate yourself as a Christian from 1 to 10. You know, that line of questioning, it's just out of pocket. But today, the Judiciary Committee, we're hearing from inviting experts who are going to weigh in on the judge confirmation. You mentioned, the line of questioning that we're getting from Republicans. Do you think she'll get any Republican votes?
Probably not. And if she does, I think that it is going to be possibly 2. But for the most part, no. I don't think that she's going to get the same. She's not going to get the same Republican votes who voted for her in her 3 previous judicial nomination processes.
That's just wild.
So I think that's proof pudding as to the political cycle we happen to be in, and them looking towards 2022 midterms more than anything else.
Right.
So Justice Clarence Thomas, he missed a 3rd day of oral arguments on Wednesday. He's been hospitalized since Friday with what the court describes as flu-like symptoms. They've been kind of quiet about his condition, but they do say he does not have COVID. But Clarence Thomas, he's the oldest and the longest serving person on the court. What are your thoughts on term limits for justices?
That's a hard thing. I think that at the end of the day, when we're talking about appointees, and Supreme Court appointees tend to outlast multiple presidencies and multiple generations. With that being said, the only time term limits are brought up, to be honest, on either side of the political spectrum, is when their side does not have the predominant seats on the court. If the swing was in the Democrats' favor, then Democrats would be anti-term limits. But currently, the swing is in the Republicans' favor. I feel as though these are very consequential seats, and Democrats need to take the opportunity to ensure that when they have aging members, that they subtly push them out. But being very mindful of the time frame that they have on this court. I think it's one of the biggest regrets Democrats have, that during the Obama administration, that they did not go full throttle and select an appointee despite opposition from conservatives.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about term limits and packing the court potentially. All of that, of course, going to be more conversation for later. We will have to have you back on. Amisha Cross, thank you for joining us today on Fox Soul's Black Report.
Thanks for having me.
WNBA star Brittney Griner is said to be in good condition amid her detention in Russia. The State Department announced that a U.S. embassy official met with her yesterday for the first time since her arrest. Griner has been in custody since February 17th. Now, her lawyers say that she has been communicating regularly with her family. She is currently in pretrial detainment. A judge recently extended the investigation period to May 19th, but experts believe it's likely that prosecutors will seek and receive receive another extension. Griner was detained earlier this year when Russian authorities said they found vape cartridges with cannabis oil in them. The crime carries a penalty of 10 years. Now, LGBTQ plus people have been viciously attacked by anti-LGBTQ propaganda for years in Russia. We know this. So I honestly feel like it's a case of wrong place, wrong time. But she's a queer black woman in Russia, is not good. But let's just give a couple of her accolades here. Best offensive player in the league. She won an NCAA national championship. She won a WNBA championship, Olympic gold medals to her name. And so at first I thought, like, okay, they don't want to talk about this because they don't want to blow it up too much. But if this was one of America's great white hopes, like Tom Brady, for example, this would be completely different, a completely different story.
Yeah, and I think it is bad timing. You know, we have the war going on, right? We have the fact that she's over there and she's from America, and now the relationship between the U.S. and Russia, we see where that's going. Mimi made a very important statement the other day, made a great point saying, look, they get so much more money when they go abroad, but even if they made more money here in America, they probably would still take that job in the summertime because it gives them a chance to see other parts of the world, and that's okay. Again, this is so unfortunate that it's happening during this time of war.
You know, and Demi, to your point, her Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Brittney is from Texas, and she has been all over this because she represents Brittney's district, and she has, you know, been fighting for her. She met with the State Department earlier last week, and she has been demanding her release. So I feel just a little bit better knowing she has this black woman who is fighting for her, because we tend to get things done.
Now, it's interesting, though. There's a former Assistant Secretary of Defense who says that we have to be careful because we're not 100% certain that these items were actually on her when she was arrested, and that there is some concern about Russia planting these devices that we need to be clear about. But also, I just want to make sure that we realize if she is sentenced and convicted, we're not talking about regular jail. We're talking about a labor camp in Russia.
Wow.
So this is something that we have to pay close attention to, and it's startling that she was not able to talk to anybody from the U.S. consular there for weeks after her detainment.
Absolutely. You're right. You're absolutely right. For me, the first time that they actually said that people did something that they really didn't do, right? Meanwhile, President Biden is in Brussels, Belgium today, meeting with NATO leaders. Yesterday, the Biden administration formally declared members of the Russian military have committed war crimes in Ukraine. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made the announcement Wednesday. The declaration comes days after President Biden, the Secretary of State, and his deputy, Wendy Sherman, all said they personally believe war crimes have been committed. It remains to be seen if a formal declaration will bring real penalties.
We always ask, you know, how is this affecting us at home? Well, the White House has issued an urgent warning that Russian cyber attacks against the U.S. could be on the horizon. So experts, they recommend if your passwords are less than 8 characters long, you should consider changing them immediately. It's something they say Americans can do easily, but have not made a habit of doing. Also, pay close attention to who has access to your accounts, because the best way to protect yourself really is to only give yourself access using 2-factor authentication. That way you get a text message or an email as part of your login process. Now, U.S. officials say they don't have any information about an imminent attack, but they did say the federal government is preparing for one given recent threats.
An Indiana senator is walking back his comments on interracial marriage. During a conference call with reporters yesterday, Republican Mike Braun said the issue of abortion should have been left up to individual states and not decided by the Supreme Court. When asked if that same reasoning should be applied to the Supreme Court ruling that legalized interracial marriage, Braun agreed. That touched off a firestorm with the Indiana Democratic Party, calling his comments un-American. Braun later clarified his remarks, saying he misunderstood the question and that he in any form condemns racism. You know, I listened to this exchange between him and the reporter, and I think the reporter asked him twice. And I think the second time the reporter asked him to kind of clarify because he wanted to make sure that he heard it correctly. And he said he doesn't believe interracial marriage should be legal nationwide. His exact words were to the effect of, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Now, when everything went sour and there was a lot of backlash from this, he kind of walked back those comments. But I believe that when he said that, he meant it. He might not have expected the backlash that he got from it, and so here we are now.
I mean, Republicans get their cake and eat it too all the time.
Yeah.
So it is not true that you can't have your cake and eat it too. Also, love is a universal language, and we're in 2022 still fighting for those to love whoever you want to love. It makes absolutely no sense at all.
Absolutely.
Now, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed the Wisconsin Supreme Court judgment that's regarding legislative maps. So the maps set boundaries for the state's 8 U.S. House districts. Those redistricting maps created an additional majority black district in Wisconsin. So it says that it was necessary to comply with the Voting Rights Act. Opponents argued that there wasn't sufficient justification to create that district. The Wisconsin Supreme Court upheld the maps, but opponents brought the case to the U.S. Supreme Court, which reversed that decision.
U.S. and world leaders are mourning the death of Madeleine Albright, the first female U.S. Secretary of State. Albright passed away yesterday of cancer. She was 84 years old. Albright was born Marie Jana Korbelova in 1937. Her father, who was Czech diplomat, took his family to England in 1939, shortly after the Nazis invaded the country. The former Secretary of State became a U.S. citizen in 1959. She was earned a Ph.D. in public law in 1976 at Columbia University. In 1993, she served as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. 3 years later, President Clinton named her as the first woman to serve as Secretary of State. Remembered as a trailblazer, Albright came under heavy criticism for recommending then President Clinton withdraw peacekeeping forces from Rwanda in 1994. As a result, one of the worst genocides in the 20th century happened, with the deaths of 800,000 Tutsis being murdered in just 100 days by Hutu militias. Albright is survived by 3 daughters.
Vice President Kamala Harris will spearhead a new effort to make home ownership more affordable and equitable for minority families. She announced a 21-step plan to end bias and racial discrimination in the home appraisal process. Now, her plan, it calls for more accountability as well as oversight. Harris says blacks and Latinos often pay higher monthly mortgages and sell their homes for less money than whites. Minorities are also less likely to get home equity loans.
And VP Harris felt wounded and belittled by a Vogue cover shoot of her. That's according to an excerpt from the forthcoming book, This Will Not Pass: Trump, Biden, and the Battle for America's Future. The book, written by 2 New York reporters, says that Harris dispatched a top aide to let Vogue's editor-in-chief, Anna Wintour, know she was not happy. The book says Harris did not like the casual look the magazine chose for the cover. A Vogue spokesperson said in a statement, the team loved the images and felt the more informal image captured the vice president's authentic, approachable nature. The image was shot by Tyler Mitchell, who became the first black photographer ever to shoot a Vogue cover in 2018. Mitchell also captured Beyonce for the magazine's cover.
And the often controversial Marjorie Taylor Greene, well, she's back at it again. The Georgia Congresswoman says that she feels threatened by transgender women. In a tweet earlier this week, Greene says they are, quote, aggressively replacing cisgender women in some spaces. Greene went on to refer to trans women as biological men. It's a term LGBTQ plus activists say is often used by bigots.
Former Trump advisor Paul Manafort was removed from a plane at Miami International Airport because he was reportedly carrying a revoked passport. The plane was set to take off for Dubai on Sunday. The Justice Department said in 2017, court filing that Manafort has submitted 10 passport applications over the last decade and that he had 3 active U.S. passports, each with a different identification number. Manafort spent decades as a high-paid consultant for political figures in countries like Ukraine. In 2018, he was convicted of 8 crimes, including illegal foreign lobbying and money laundering and conspiracy involving his undisclosed lobbying for Ukraine. He was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison, but only served about 2 due to concerns about the COVID-19 pandemic. Police say Manafort was removed from the plane without incident.
Well, now you can get Texas-style burgers, wings, barbecue, and abortion bans. The governor of Idaho signed a bill this week allowing people to sue doctors who perform abortions. It's modeled after the Texas abortion law, which so far has withstood legal challenges. Idaho's law, it allows people who have been related to the baby or would have been related to the baby to sue doctors who performed abortions for a minimum of $20,000 after a heartbeat is detected. Rapists cannot sue under the law, but their relatives can. The law goes into effect in 30 days. Court challenges are expected, and just today, the Arizona legislature joined Republicans in passing a similar 15-week abortion ban.
Meanwhile, Governor Newsom says he's eliminating out-of-pocket costs for reproductive services here in California. He signed the Abortion Accessibility Act into law. The new law prevents health plans and insurance companies from imposing co-pays, deductibles, or other costs for abortion and abortion-related services. California is among 6 states requiring health care plans to cover reproductive services.
The family of Emmanuel Ellis has agreed to a $4 million settlement 2 years after he died at the hands of police. Tacoma police stopped Ellis as he was coming from a store. Ellis told police he could not breathe as they restrained him. The incident happened just weeks before George Floyd's death in 2020. 3 officers have been charged in Ellis's death. The Pierce County Council voted unanimously to settle the wrongful death case with the Ellis family.